You didn't defeat me when you had time, so don't panic now that the clock ran out. Let's get one thing straight from the beginning, because I know this question is already forming in your mind. Why does it feel like the people who hate me the most always end up exposing themselves? Here's the answer. Because hate makes people reckless. Hate makes people loud. Hate makes people sloppy. And somebody, somewhere, finally slipped. Not because they're brave, not because they're powerful, but because resentment eventually removes self-control. When people are obsessed with watching you, they forget who's watching them. Main heading, idiomatic rewrite. They played themselves, trying to play you. I'm talking directly to you right now, the one who's been moving quietly, staying focused, trying to rise above nonsense. And I'm also talking to them, the ones who mistook your silence for weakness and your patience for permission. You see, there's a certain type of person who doesn't just dislike you. They study you, they track you, they wait for you to mess up. And when you don't, it irritates them. That irritation turns into mockery. That mockery turns into arrogance, and that arrogance makes them think they're untouchable. Let me say this plainly. Chosen people don't need to announce themselves. Their presence does the talking. Their progress does the talking. Their endurance does the talking. And when you're chosen, whether that's by purpose, position, talent, timing, or resilience, you don't have to fight every battle. Time fights for you. Pressure exposes the truth for you. And eventually, the very people trying to break you end up cracking under the weight of their own behavior. I know another question you might be asking right now. Why did they go that far? Why mock what I stand on? Why challenge what keeps me grounded? Because they wanted to prove something to themselves. They wanted to believe that nothing shields you, that you're not really as protected, supported, or favored as you seem. They needed you to be ordinary so they could feel superior. And when reality didn't cooperate, they got careless. Think of it like this. A fly buzzing around a window doesn't realize the glass is what's keeping it trapped. It keeps hitting the same spot, thinking persistence will save it. That's what happened here. Someone kept testing boundaries, pushing buttons, saying slick things, assuming there would be no consequence. They confused delay with escape. They confused tolerance with fear. And now they're realizing, too late, that patience is not the absence of power, it's the presence of control. Here's the part that should fuel you. You didn't have to expose them. You didn't have to retaliate. You didn't have to prove anything. Their own mouth did the work. Their own actions told the story. Their own slip revealed intent. That's the power of being chosen. You don't need to chase validation. You attract revelation. People show who they are around you because your energy demands authenticity, whether they want to give it or not. And let's talk to the enemy for a moment, since they're definitely listening. You should have stayed quiet. You should have stayed observant. You should have remembered that people who rise without noise usually fall without warning. You mistook access for control. You mistook proximity for power. And now you're standing in the aftermath of a moment you can't undo, wondering how everything turned so fast. That's what happens when envy speaks before wisdom catches up. To you, the one watching this and feeling that strange mix of validation and relief, this is your reminder. Stop shrinking yourself to make other people comfortable. Stop questioning your intuition. Stop wondering if you imagined the disrespect. You didn't. What you sensed was real. What you felt was accurate. And what's unfolding now is confirmation. Not because you wished harm on anyone, but because truth has a way of surfacing when pressure is applied. This isn't about revenge. It's about alignment. It's about recognizing that when you're chosen, certain doors close automatically. Certain people disqualify themselves. Certain games end without your participation. And while others are busy scrambling to clean up their mistakes, you're being positioned to move forward, lighter, clearer, and stronger. So no, It's not your job to celebrate their downfall. Your job is to keep walking. Because while they're stuck explaining themselves, you're already gone. Before we move any further, take a moment to stand with us. If this message spoke to you, like this video so it reaches the people who need it most. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. This is how you stay connected to content that's real, empowering, and transformative. And if you're able, consider supporting the work by sending a super thanks. Your support directly fuels the time, energy, and dedication our team puts into creating these inspiring, life-changing, high-energy messages consistently. Every like, share, and contribution helps us keep showing up for you, stronger and louder every time. Number 1. When dislike turns into a public mistake, they let their grudge write the confession. When someone can't stand you, they eventually stand in their own mess. Listen closely, because this is the moment everything shifts. This is where confusion turns into clarity. This is where you stop asking yourself, was I imagining it? And start realizing, no, this was always real. Someone didn't just dislike you quietly. They didn't just move on. They let that dislike ferment, grow teeth, and turn into something reckless. And in that recklessness, they made a public mistake. Not because they were forced, not because they were provoked, but because resentment always needs an audience eventually. Let's be clear about something. You didn't cause this. Your existence didn't provoke them. Your success didn't force their hand. What happened is simpler and more brutal. Your presence exposed a weakness in them they didn't want to face. Chosen people do that. Not intentionally, not aggressively, just by being consistent, grounded, and unmovable. You became a mirror they couldn't avoid, and instead of self-reflection, they chose projection. I know the question that's probably looping in your mind right now. Why couldn't they just leave me alone? Because people who are secure don't monitor others. People who are fulfilled don't mock. People who are aligned don't obsess. The moment someone starts watching your moves more than their own, the outcome is already decided. You were never competing with them. They were competing with the version of you they couldn't become. Here's the part that should wake something up inside you. They didn't slip up in private. They slipped where it mattered. Words were said, actions were seen, screenshots were taken, reactions were noticed. The mask cracked. And once that crack appears, everything leaks out. That's how it always goes. It's like someone trying to carry water in their hands. No matter how tight they squeeze, it eventually spills. That spill is what people are finally seeing. And to the ones who thought you were weak because you stayed quiet, this is where they miscalculated. Silence isn't absence. It's restraint. It's discipline. It's strategy. You didn't respond because you didn't need to. You understood something they didn't. People reveal themselves faster when you don't interrupt them. While they were busy building a story about you, they accidentally wrote their own character description. Let me talk directly to the chosen ones for a moment. Being chosen doesn't mean life is easy. It means pressure is constant. It means misunderstanding is common. It means people will test you just to see if you're real. And the hardest part, you don't get to react the way everyone else does. You're watched too closely for that. Your restraint becomes your power, and that's what confuses them. They expect chaos. You give composure. They expect retaliation. You give consistency. And eventually, that contrast makes them unravel. Now let's address the enemy without softening a single word. You should have stayed disciplined. You should have stayed neutral. You should have remembered that obsession clouds judgment. Instead, you let emotion outrun intelligence. You spoke when silence would have protected you. You mocked when distance would have saved you. And now the very thing you tried to use as ammunition has turned into evidence. That's not bad luck. That's poor self-control. Think of it like a chess game. The chosen ones don't rush the board, they don't celebrate early, they don't expose their strategy. But the impatient player, they move too fast, they underestimate, they assume dominance before the checkmate is even visible, and then suddenly, game over. Not because the opponent was loud, but because they were precise. If you're wondering, what happens next? Here's the truth. You don't need to do anything different. You don't need to explain. You don't need to defend your name. The moment already did that for you. People are connecting dots without your help. Patterns are becoming obvious, and the same individuals who doubted you are quietly re-evaluating everything they thought they knew. This is the power of being chosen. You don't chase justice, clarity follows you. You don't force exposure, truth surfaces on its own, and you don't need to hit back, because life has a way of returning energy with interest. So stand tall, stay composed, let them sit with what they revealed. Because while they're busy trying to undo one careless moment, you're already 10 steps ahead, untouched, unbothered, and unmistakably set apart. Number 2, small petty moves that expose big intentions. Little jabs, loud confessions. Petty actions are just big truths trying to escape in small ways. This is where things get interesting, because what you're witnessing now isn't coincidence. It's pattern. Small comments, subtle digs, side glances, quiet sabotage. Things so minor on the surface that if you called them out, someone might say you're overreacting. But you're not. You never were. Because chosen ones don't just notice behavior, they read intention. And intention always leaks, no matter how carefully someone tries to hide it. Here's what people don't understand about petty moves. They're never about the moment. They're about the motive. Nobody invests energy into tiny acts unless there's something larger driving them. Nobody keeps track of what doesn't threaten them. So when someone goes out of their way to do something small but unnecessary, dismissive but deliberate, subtle but repeated, that's not random. That's rehearsal. That's someone testing how far they can go without being exposed. You might have asked yourself, why would they do something so minor if they feel so strongly? Because bold attacks require confidence, and they didn't have it. They tried to erode you quietly, chip away at your image, plant doubts, create confusion. They assumed you wouldn't notice, or worse, that you'd notice but stay silent. And when you didn't react the way they expected, the behavior escalated. That's how small moves become loud mistakes. Chosen people trigger insecurity without saying a word. Your consistency becomes a threat. Your composure feels like judgment. Your progress feels personal. So instead of addressing their own discomfort, they externalize it. A sarcastic comment here, a passive-aggressive action there, a joke that isn't really a joke. Each one is a breadcrumb leading straight back to the truth. They were never indifferent. They were watching closely. Think of it like a leak in a wall. At first, it's just a damp spot, easy to ignore. But that dampness comes from somewhere. Pressure builds behind the surface, and eventually the wall can't hold it anymore. What you're seeing now is the crack. The moment where the disguise slipped and people finally noticed what you sensed all along. Those small actions told a much bigger story than they ever intended. Let's talk directly to the chosen ones again, because this is where self-trust matters most. Stop downplaying what you observed. Stop minimizing patterns just because they didn't come with fireworks. You don't need dramatic proof to validate your awareness. Precision doesn't require volume. The fact that you noticed without reacting, that's strength, that's discernment, that's the discipline they underestimated. And to the ones who thought subtlety would protect them, here's the truth you didn't plan for. Repetition is exposure. When you do the same small thing enough times, it stops looking accidental. It starts looking intentional. And once intention is visible, control disappears. People begin connecting dots you hoped would stay scattered. That's when panic sets in. That's when explanations start sounding defensive. That's when the story unravels. There's a reason chosen people don't rush to confront every slight. It's not avoidance, it's observation. You let behavior stack up. You let actions speak. You allow time to do what confrontation can't. Reveal consistency. And consistency never lies. While they were busy thinking they were being clever, they were actually documenting their mindset. If you're wondering, should I have stopped them earlier? No. Interrupting someone mid-exposure only delays the truth. Silence gave them room to show themselves fully. You didn't lose control. You preserved leverage. Now the narrative isn't about your reaction. It's about their pattern. Here's the part they never accounted for. Chosen ones don't need to prove intent. They attract witnesses. People see things differently once they're given enough examples. What once looked harmless now looks calculated. What once felt dismissible now feels deliberate. And suddenly, the same people who ignored your experience are asking quiet questions of their own. Small moves, big intentions, and now irreversible clarity. You didn't need to strike back. You didn't need to escalate. You just needed to stay steady. Because when someone's dislike runs deep, even their smallest actions will eventually shout the truth. And once that truth is seen, it can't be unseen. Number 3, staying silent. While someone rewrites your story, you stayed quiet while they lied out loud. Silence isn't weakness when the truth is patient. There comes a point where you realize something uncomfortable but powerful. While you were focused on living, building, and surviving, someone else was busy rewriting your story without your permission. And the reason that hurts at first is because silence feels risky. It feels like surrender. It feels like letting someone else control the narrative. But here's what you didn't know at the time, and what they never accounted for. Silence, in the hands of the chosen, is not absence. It's pressure. It's a pause that lets people hang themselves with their own words. You didn't stay quiet because you were scared. You stayed quiet because you understood something deeper than reaction. You understood that people who lie loudly need opposition to feel real. Without resistance, their words echo back empty. You watch them exaggerate. You watch them twist timelines. You watch them assign intentions you never had. And the whole time, you ask yourself the question they hoped would break you. Should I say something? Should I defend myself? Here's the truth you're stepping into now. Defending yourself to people who already decided you're the villain never works. They don't want clarity. They want confirmation. And you, refusing to participate in that circus, forced them to escalate. It forced them to say more, to do more, to reach further than they should have. That's when the cracks started forming. Chosen people don't rush to correct misinformation because they understand something others don't. Lies require maintenance. Truth does not. A lie has to be repeated, embellished, and protected. Truth just waits. While they were busy patching holes in a fake story, reality kept moving. People watched inconsistencies stack up. Timelines stopped matching. Their emotional reactions didn't fit the role they assigned you. And slowly, quietly, the room started noticing. Let's address the fear you probably had during this phase. The fear of being misunderstood. The fear of being misjudged. The fear of being painted as something you're not. That fear is real. But here's the paradox. Chosen ones are often misunderstood at first because their restraint looks unnatural to people who operate on impulse. When you don't react the way they expect, it unsettles them. They want anger. You give composure. They want chaos. You give consistency. And that contrast exposes intent faster than any argument ever could. Now let's talk directly to the ones who rewrote your story. You mistook silence for permission. You thought no response meant agreement. You assumed no confrontation meant no awareness. And because of that assumption, you got bold, too bold. You added details that weren't necessary. You exaggerated emotions you couldn't justify. You forgot that stories collapse when the storyteller can't keep their tone straight. You didn't realize that the more you talked, the less believable you became. Think of it like a courtroom where one side keeps interrupting, over-explaining and raising their voice, while the other sits still and lets the facts speak. Anyone watching knows who's nervous. Anyone paying attention knows who's performing. That's what happened here. Your stillness wasn't passive. It was strategic. You allowed the full version of them to come out, not the polished one. And here's the part that shifts everything for you. Your silence didn't delay justice, it accelerated exposure. People trust patterns more than explanations. And over time, the pattern became obvious. You stayed consistent, they stayed reactive, you stayed grounded, they stayed emotional, you stayed moving forward, they stayed stuck talking about you. At some point, the question flipped. It stopped being, "What did you do?" and became, "Why are they so obsessed?" Being chosen means understanding timing. It means knowing when to speak and when to let the noise burn itself out. Not everyone has the discipline to do that. Not everyone can sit in discomfort without scrambling for control. You can. That's why this phase didn't break you. It refined you. If you're wondering what this means now, here it is. The story they tried to write is losing credibility. The silence you maintained is being reinterpreted as strength. And the very restraint they mocked is the reason they're being questioned. You don't need to rewrite anything. You're already living the correction. So keep your composure. Let the truth finish what silence started. Because when you're chosen, you don't have to shout your innocence. The collapse of the lie does that for you. Number 4, being pushed until you finally react. They cornered you until you spoke back. If someone keeps poking a calm surface, they shouldn't be shocked when it finally ripples. This part matters because this is where the story usually gets twisted. This is where people who don't understand pressure start judging reactions without ever acknowledging provocation. You weren't explosive by nature. You weren't unstable. You weren't looking for conflict. You were pushed, slowly, intentionally, repeatedly. And anyone who's ever been cornered knows this truth. Restraint has a limit, and silence is not infinite. Chosen ones attract pressure differently. You don't just face challenges, you face tests. Subtle ones at first, passive comments, side glances, quiet undermining, little attempts to get under your skin. The kind of behavior that's easy to deny and hard to explain. And that's exactly why it works. Because the person doing it knows that if you react too early, you look unreasonable. So they wait, they poke, they provoke, they gather patience like they're stacking weight on your back, fully aware that one day something will shift. You might be asking yourself right now, why did they want me to react so badly? Because a reaction was their only chance at control. They couldn't outgrow you. They couldn't outperform you. They couldn't silence you through success. So they tried to drag you down to a moment, a single emotional response they could point to and say, "See, this is who they really are." What they didn't count on was how obvious the setup would become once the pressure cracked. Here's the thing they never understand about chosen people. When you finally respond, it's not impulsive, it's accumulated. It's not random, it's overdue. You don't explode at the first sign of disrespect. You absorb, you analyze, you give space. And when you finally speak, it's not because you lost control. It's because you decided the pattern was no longer worth tolerating. That distinction matters, even if your critics pretend it doesn't. Think of it like bending a metal rod, slowly, steadily, applying force over time. From the outside, it looks unchanged, still straight, still solid, until the exact second it bends, and suddenly everyone acts surprised. "Why did it snap?" they ask, conveniently ignoring the pressure applied minute after minute. That's what happened here. Your reaction wasn't the problem, it was the evidence. And let's address the quiet accusation that always follows. Shouldn't you have handled it better? That question usually comes from people who weren't there for the build-up. People who didn't see the manipulation, the gaslighting, the subtle disrespect. People who only showed up for the moment, not the context. But chosen ones know context is everything. You're not required to be endlessly absorbent just to make others comfortable. To the ones who pushed you hoping for that moment, this is where you misjudged the situation. You thought the reaction would weaken them. You thought it would discredit them. Instead, it highlighted how much they endured before responding. It raised questions you didn't want asked. Why were you so invested? Why were you always present in their space? Why did you need that reaction so badly? Suddenly, the spotlight shifted. Before we go any further, pause for a second and really sit with this question. Have you ever watched someone underestimate you so badly that they ended up exposing themselves? Not because you fought back, not because you explained yourself, but because their own words revealed what they were hiding. If this title hit something deep in you, it's not random. It's because you felt the protection around your life, even when others mocked it or doubted it out of pure hate. I want you to be honest here. What moment made you realize someone crossed a line with you? Write it in the comments. Your voice matters, and your story might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. Chosen ones don't break under pressure. They reveal the pressure. And once that's visible, the narrative changes. People start noticing patterns instead of moments, motives instead of emotions. And the story you tried to write using their reaction starts falling apart line by line. This is also where your power sharpens, because now you understand something crucial. You don't owe anyone endless access to your patience. You don't owe politeness to repeated disrespect. And you don't owe silence to people who benefit from it. Your reaction wasn't a failure, it was a boundary finally enforced. If you're worried that responding made you lose your edge, let me be clear, it didn't. It clarified it. It showed that you're not passive, just controlled, not fragile, just selective. And that awareness alone changes how people approach you moving forward. Pressure only works when it's invisible. Once exposed, it loses its leverage. So don't let anyone rewrite this chapter as weakness. This was a turning point, a line drawn, a signal sent, and while some people will cling to that single moment, others will finally see the full picture. The chosen ones always reach this phase, not because they enjoy conflict, but because growth demands limits. You weren't pushed to react so they could win. You were pushed to react so the truth could surface. And now that it has, the balance has shifted permanently. Number 5. How your reaction was used against you. They weaponized your reaction and still lost control. They waited for you to flinch so they could pretend you were the threat. This is the part of the story where they thought they finally had you. The moment you reacted, spoke up, pushed back, showed frustration, they leaned forward like spectators who'd been waiting for a single misstep. There it is, they told themselves. Now everyone will see what I've been saying all along. What they never understood is this. Reacting under pressure doesn't erase your truth. It exposes theirs. And the fact that they needed your reaction to validate their narrative already tells the whole story. Let's talk directly to you, the one who's been carrying this quietly. You didn't react because you're unstable. You reacted because you're human, because being tested repeatedly wears on anyone, because silence, when abused, eventually becomes unbearable, and because there's a breaking point that exists not as weakness, but as proof that you've been enduring far longer than most people ever could. Chosen ones aren't immune to emotion. They're just expected to carry more without dropping it. Here's the trick they tried to pull. They ignored everything that led up to your response, and zoomed in on the response itself. That's like watching the final minute of a movie and claiming you understand the plot. Provocation after provocation, push after push, boundary crossed after boundary crossed, all erased in their retelling. Why? Because context doesn't serve manipulators. Selective memory does. You might be asking yourself right now, did I ruin everything by reacting? Did I give them exactly what they wanted? No. What you gave them was temporary confidence, and confidence built on half-truths always collapses. They mistook your reaction for exposure, when in reality it was the stress test that revealed who had control and who didn't. Notice this. After you reacted, they didn't calm down. They escalated. They talked more. They explained more. They tried harder. That's not the behavior of someone who won. That's panic. Chosen people live under a microscope. Every emotion is judged. Every word is analyzed. You don't get the luxury of being misunderstood quietly. Your reactions are scrutinized because your presence already unsettles people. When someone feels threatened by your potential, they don't attack your character head-on. They wait for you to defend yourself, then call the defense proof of guilt. It's a classic move, and it only works on those who don't see the full board. Think of it like this. A skilled fighter doesn't fear being hit once. They fear losing balance. You didn't lose balance. You adjusted. You showed that you're not an object to be poked endlessly without consequence. That moment wasn't your downfall. It was the boundary they didn't expect you to draw. And once you drew it, they panicked, because now the game changed. Let's be clear about something important. The people who truly know you didn't suddenly turn against you because you reacted. The ones who were waiting for you to fail, they were never on your side to begin with. Your reaction didn't create enemies. It revealed observers who were hoping for a reason. And that's a gift, even if it didn't feel like one at the time. To the ones who tried to use your reaction as a weapon, here's the truth they won't say out loud. If you were really the problem, they wouldn't have needed years of build-up to make their case. They wouldn't have needed to provoke, record, exaggerate, or rehearse the story. Truth doesn't need assistance. Lies do. And the more effort someone puts into framing you, the more obvious it becomes that they're protecting themselves, not exposing you. Chosen ones don't win by being perfect. They win by being resilient, by recalibrating instead of retreating, by learning when to speak, when to pull back, and when to let time do the work. You didn't lose power because you reacted. You learned where it truly sits. And now, while they're busy replaying a single moment, you're moving forward with clarity they can't reach. They tried to trap you in a reaction. Instead, they revealed their intention. And that's a trade you'll win every time. Number 6, questioning your strength because they misjudged it. They thought your strength was an act until it started costing them. People only question your strength when they're afraid of what happens if it's real. This is where their biggest mistake becomes obvious. They didn't just underestimate you, they misread you. They looked at your calm and assumed softness. They watched your restraint and labeled it weakness. They saw you choosing peace and decided you lacked power. And that misjudgment gave them confidence. Too much confidence. The kind that makes people bold in all the wrong ways. Let's address the thought you may have had, but didn't say out loud. Why did they keep pushing me like I had nothing behind me? Because they believed your strength depended on noise. They thought power had to announce itself. They expected dominance to look aggressive, loud, dramatic. What they didn't understand is that chosen people don't leak energy, proving who they are. Their strength is internal, regulated, disciplined. And discipline always looks invisible to undisciplined minds. They questioned your strength because it didn't fit their narrow definition. You didn't crumble when pressured. You didn't spiral when provoked. You didn't beg for validation or rush to correct every lie. That confused them. And when people don't understand something, they test it, they poke, they provoke, they cross lines just to see what happens, not realizing that every test was being noted, measured, and quietly stored. Here's the truth. Strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it watches. Sometimes it lets people talk long enough to hang themselves with their own words. That's what happened here. They assumed that because you didn't react, you couldn't. They mistook self-control for fear. And that assumption gave them the audacity to question what protects you, your boundaries, your mindset, your resilience, your self-respect. Let me talk directly to the chosen ones right now. Being chosen doesn't mean you're invincible. It means you're intentional. You don't move on impulse. You don't waste energy explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You understand timing. And timing is a form of power most people never master. While others swing wildly, you wait for alignment. And alignment always beats aggression. To the ones who misjudged you, this is where things turned. The moment you questioned someone's strength out loud, you revealed your own insecurity. Secure people don't mock resilience. They don't test limits for entertainment. They don't assume someone is unprotected just because consequences haven't arrived yet. That's gamblers' thinking. And eventually the house always wins. Think of it like standing near a quiet river. It doesn't crash or make a scene, but it never stops moving. Over time, it carves through rock. That's you. And they're the ones throwing stones, laughing at the surface, not realizing erosion doesn't need permission. It just happens. Slowly, relentlessly. And by the time the damage is visible, it's irreversible. You may have wondered, should I have proven myself sooner? Should I have spoken up? No. Because proving strength to people who already decided you don't have it only feeds their ego. Silence, in your case, wasn't avoidance. It was authority. You let reality speak louder than reactions. And now they're scrambling to reinterpret moments they laughed at too soon. This is where their confidence starts to collapse. Because once you question someone's strength publicly and you're wrong, you don't get to rewind. You don't get to say, I didn't mean it like that. The doubt you planted boomerangs back. Others start questioning you, your judgment, your motives, your credibility, all because you couldn't resist taking a shot at someone who never fired back. Here's what chosen people understand that others don't. Real power doesn't rush. It doesn't posture. It doesn't need approval. And it definitely doesn't mock what it doesn't understand. While they were busy counting your silence as a loss, you were accumulating leverage. Emotional, social, strategic. And now that leverage is shifting the balance without you lifting a finger. So stand steady, don't shrink, don't over-explain. Let them sit with the discomfort of realizing they miscalculated you. Because the moment someone questions your strength and turns out to be wrong, that's the moment they start losing ground. And from here on out, every step they take will remind them of one thing they can't undo. They mistook patience for powerlessness, and that mistake is costing them everything. Number 7. The confidence of someone who thinks nothing will happen. They mistook silence for safety. The most dangerous confidence is believing consequences need an invitation. This section exists for one reason, to expose a very specific mindset. The kind that convinces someone they're immune, the kind that whispers, nothing has happened yet, so nothing ever will. This is the confidence of someone who thinks they've outsmarted reality itself. And it's always loud right before it collapses. You've seen it. Maybe you've felt it aimed at you. That smug calm, that careless energy, that tone people use when they believe the rules don't apply to them. They speak freely. They mock openly. They move recklessly. Not because they're powerful, but because they think they're invisible. And that belief is exactly what puts them in danger. Chosen ones, this is where your restraint becomes the trigger. Not your words, not your reactions, your composure. Your refusal to engage is what convinces them they've won. They look at your silence and interpret it as fear. They look at your patience and assume weakness. They look at your distance and believe they're untouchable. That's the mistake. Silence isn't surrender. It's observation. It's control. It's the calm before accountability catches up. Here's a question you might be asking yourself right now. Why do they act so bold when they know what they did? Because people who are guilty but unchecked often confuse time with forgiveness. They assume that if nothing exploded immediately, it never will. They forget that some outcomes are delayed, not denied. Like cracks in a foundation, you don't notice them until the structure starts leaning. And by then, it's too late to pretend everything is stable. This kind of confidence is borrowed confidence. It feeds off the absence of immediate pushback. It's like speeding on an empty road and believing traffic laws don't exist until headlights appear in the mirror. That's what's happening here. Someone thought they could keep going unchecked, keep saying slick things, keep crossing lines, keep testing limits, and the entire time they were mistaking your self-control for permission. Let's be very clear. Chosen people don't need to announce consequences. They don't threaten. They don't warn repeatedly. Their power works quietly. It works in timing. It works in exposure. While the other side grows louder and more arrogant, chosen ones stay grounded, and that imbalance always corrects itself. Now let's address the enemy directly, because confidence built on disrespect is fragile. You should have stopped while you were ahead. You should have noticed how calm they stayed. You should have questioned why they never chased your approval or reacted to your jabs. That wasn't indifference. That was awareness. And now you're starting to feel it, that subtle shift, that tension, that moment when certainty turns into anxiety and you realize the room feels different. Chosen ones understand this. When someone believes nothing will happen, it's usually because they don't understand how consequences work. They imagine punishment as dramatic and immediate. They don't realize that real consequences are quiet. They show up as lost credibility, shifted alliances, closed doors, sudden exposure. They arrive as moments that can't be undone, words that can't be retracted, and impressions that can't be erased. You didn't need to rush their downfall. You didn't need to interrupt their behavior. Their overconfidence did all the work, like someone leaning too far back in a chair, laughing until gravity reminds them it's still in charge. That's the moment approaching. The laugh stops, the room goes quiet, and suddenly the same people who felt untouchable are scrambling to regain control. If you're wondering, should I say something now? Should I step in? Should I defend myself? The answer is no. This chapter isn't about your response, it's about their realization. Your role is to remain aligned, observant, and unmoved. Let them feel the weight of their own assumption. Let them sit with the truth that silence was never safety. It was a test they failed. This is the advantage of being chosen. You don't need to chase justice. You don't need to force outcomes. You simply outlast arrogance, and arrogance always collapses under its own weight. So keep moving the way you've been moving. Let confidence built on mockery unravel on its own, because the moment someone truly believes nothing will happen, that's usually the moment everything starts to. Number 8. One slip that changed everything for them. One wrong move and the whole story changed. All it takes is one careless moment to undo years of pretending. This is where everything pivots, not slowly, not subtly, instantly. Because no matter how long someone has hidden their intentions, no matter how carefully they curated their image, all it takes is one slip for the truth to surface. And that slip didn't happen by accident. It happened because pressure exposes what discipline can't hide forever. You were never meant to intervene. You were never meant to confront them. Life set the stage. and they walked right into it on their own. Chosen ones need to understand this part clearly. The turning point rarely looks dramatic at first. Sometimes it's a sentence said too confidently, a joke that went too far, a message sent to the wrong person, a reaction that didn't match the situation. But once it happens, there's no rewinding it. The energy shifts. People start paying attention. Patterns that were once ignored suddenly make sense, and the same people who defended them begin to feel uncomfortable doing so. You might be asking yourself, was that really enough to change everything? Yes, because integrity doesn't collapse in pieces. It collapses in moments. When someone reveals who they are under no pressure, that's personality. When they reveal who they are under pressure, that's truth. And the truth doesn't need repetition to be believed. It only needs to be seen once. Here's what separates you from them. You've been operating with restraint. You've learned when to speak and when silence does more damage than noise ever could. You've absorbed pressure without leaking bitterness. That's not weakness, that's mastery. And mastery intimidates people who rely on manipulation to stay afloat. So they test you, they poke, they assume you'll eventually lose control the way they would. And when you don't, frustration makes them careless. That carelessness is the slip. It's like watching someone sprint on ice. They look confident for a while. They even mock others for moving slowly. But speed without awareness guarantees a fall. And when it happens, it's not graceful. It's loud. It's undeniable. Everyone sees it. That's what unfolded here. The slip wasn't just noticed. It was registered. It changed how people see them permanently. And let's be honest, they knew better. That's the part they won't admit. They knew not to say that. They knew not to act that way. They knew there were eyes watching. But arrogance whispers lies. It convinces people they're untouchable. It makes them believe their past success or social shield will protect them forever. And that belief is exactly what leads to downfall. To the chosen ones listening, this is your confirmation. You didn't imagine the tension. You didn't overread the situation. You didn't misjudge the dynamic. What you sensed was instability hiding behind confidence. And now that instability has spoken for itself, that's why you feel calm while everything around them feels shaky. You're not surprised. You were prepared. Now let's address the silent panic on the other side, because once the slip happens, fear sets in fast. They replay the moment over and over, wondering who noticed, who screenshotted, who's connecting dots. They attempt damage control, they downplay, they deflect. But here's the truth. Once perception shifts, it doesn't shift back. Trust doesn't reset, and credibility doesn't regenerate. That's the cost of underestimating someone who moves with quiet confidence. This isn't about punishment, it's about consequence. When you build your position on envy, it collapses under scrutiny. When you operate without self-awareness, exposure becomes inevitable. And when you challenge someone who's protected by discipline, timing, and clarity, you end up challenging your own stability. If you're wondering what your role is now, the answer is simple. Keep moving. Don't gloat. Don't explain. Don't revisit the moment. Chosen ones don't circle chaos, they outgrow it. While others scramble to repair an image, you focus on alignment. While they're stuck reacting, you're already advancing. One slip changed everything for them, not because you pushed, but because they leaned too far on confidence they didn't earn. And from this point forward, nothing will ever feel as secure for them as it once did. That's not your responsibility. That's the result of mistaking arrogance for immunity. Number 9. What happens when warnings are ignored repeatedly? When ignoring the signs becomes the sentence. The warning was free. The consequence never is. This is where everything comes full circle. This is the part people pretend not to understand, even though they saw it coming from miles away. Repeated warnings aren't bad luck. They're not coincidences, they're opportunities, and when someone ignores them over and over again, what follows isn't sudden, it's earned. That's the part the opposition hates admitting. They want the fallout to feel unfair, unexpected, dramatic. But the truth is quieter and colder, they were told. Multiple times, in multiple ways, and they chose arrogance over awareness. You, on the other hand, felt the tension long before the collapse. You noticed the shift in tone, the change in behavior, the unnecessary comments, the reckless confidence. You didn't need proof to know something was off. You could sense when someone stopped respecting boundaries and started testing limits. That's part of being chosen. You read energy, patterns and intent faster than most people read words, and while you adjusted, they doubled down. Let's address the question that keeps resurfacing in your mind. Why didn't they stop when they had the chance? Because some people mistake repeated survival for invincibility. They get away with something once and assume it's a green light forever. They cross a line, nothing happens immediately, and they think that means they're smarter than the system. But delay isn't approval, it's leverage. Every ignored warning stacks weight on the outcome. Think of it like a building with visible cracks. At first, it's cosmetic, easy to ignore. Then the structure starts shifting. Doors don't close right. Windows strain. Anyone paying attention knows what's coming. But the person living inside keeps rearranging furniture instead of fixing the foundation. When it finally collapses, they call it sudden. Everyone else calls it obvious. This is the difference between you and them. You listen, you course correct, you pull back when something feels wrong. You don't need life to scream at you to adjust. You respond to whispers. That's why you stay protected while others spiral. Not because you're lucky, but because you're disciplined. You respect signals. They mock them. And to the ones who kept pushing, poking, provoking, this is the hard truth. Warnings don't disappear when ignored. They turn into records. Patterns get noticed. Reputations quietly form. People start watching differently. Trust erodes. Support pulls back. And suddenly the room feels colder. That's not betrayal. That's consequence catching up. You may wonder, why does it feel like everything is unraveling for them all at once? Because consequences don't arrive one by one. They arrive in clusters. What was once manageable becomes overwhelming. What was once hidden becomes visible. And the same confidence they used to dismiss warnings now works against them because it kept them from stopping. Here's where your power comes in. You don't gloat. You don't chase vindication. You don't announce that you were right. Chosen ones don't need to. The moment speaks for itself. You understand that when someone repeatedly ignores signals, the ending is already written. You just happen to live long enough to see it unfold. And let's be clear, this isn't about punishment. It's about cause and effect. It's about what happens when someone treats caution like an insult and boundaries like a challenge. It's about what happens when disrespect becomes habit and reflection is avoided at all costs. Eventually, reality steps in, not emotionally, not personally, but decisively. So if you're feeling a strange sense of calm right now, trust it. That's not numbness. That's clarity. You're watching the final result of choices you refused to make. You stepped away when they leaned in too far. You stayed composed when they got reckless. And now, while they're scrambling to understand how things went so wrong, you're already moving forward, lighter, sharper, and untouched by the fallout. Because warnings are invitations to change. And when they're ignored repeatedly, what follows isn't a surprise. It's the conclusion. As we close this out, take a moment to reflect on what you just heard, because clarity like this doesn't come by accident. If this message resonated, like this video so it reaches the people who need it at the right time. Subscribe to the channel if you're ready to stay connected to content that empowers, sharpens, and elevates your mindset. Drop the number 77 in the comments as a sign that you received this message and you're moving with intention. And don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with someone who needs strength, perspective, and momentum right now.